On this Sunday night, sirens sound in Tel Aviv. For the first time in months, Hamas rockets rain down on Israel as trucks carrying desperately needed aid finally enter Gaza. Scrambling for shelter.
When it hit, it was just so loud.
Powerful tornadoes tear through the central United States. Mandatory military service.
We will introduce a bold new model.
The British Prime Minister's controversial campaign promise.
Global National with Farah Nasser. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. For the first time in 4 months, air raid sirens sounded in Tel Aviv, sending Israelis scrambling for cover. Hamas launched at least 8 long-range rockets. Several were intercepted and no one was hurt. But Israel says it underscores the threat Hamas continues to pose after 7 months of war. This 84-year-old and her caretaker barely escaped. She described the chaos when a rocket landed on her house. Israel says the rockets were fired from Rafah in southern Gaza. The Israeli military is preparing to launch a major offensive on that city, despite pleas from its allies and the UN's top court. And a warning, the images you're about to see here are disturbing. This was the aftermath of an Israeli strike on Rafah today. At least 30 people were killed, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. The Palestinian Red Crescent Society says the Israeli attack hit an area designated for displaced civilians. Well, late today, the Israeli military commented on that airstrike in Rafah, claiming it was targeting a compound housing Hamas militants and that it successfully eliminated 2 senior Hamas leaders. David Akin has our top story tonight.
For the first time in 4 months, air raid sirens sounded in Tel Aviv. Residents scrambled for cover. This video, released by Hamas, shows the missiles leaving Gaza. And the Israeli army says they were launched from Rafah, from a site less than a kilometer where Israeli forces were stationed.
Hamas launched these rockets from near 2 mosques in Rafah. Hamas has been attacking Israel from Rafah.
One person in Israel was injured seeking shelter from the attack, and damage otherwise was minor. This house in central Israel was damaged by a shrapnel hit. Still, it was a demonstration that even after 7 months of fighting, Hamas still has significant weapons. Meanwhile, Israel allowed around 200 aid trucks through the Kerem Shalom crossing at Gaza's southeastern corner, bypassing the main Rafah crossing that has been closed for weeks. But some of the food has been waiting so long to cross, it is beginning to rot.
Very good to see you, Prime Minister. Thank you.
And on the diplomatic front, Norway's foreign minister Sunday presented Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa with papers confirming Norway's recognition of the state of Palestine.
We very much look forward to upgrading our diplomatic and consular relations with the state of Palestine.
Mustafa used the opportunity to repeat calls for an end to the war.
I think it's time to go beyond condemning actions and requesting Israel to stop the war in Gaza. I think we need to raise the voices a little bit more and demand ceasefire.
But the rocket attack makes a ceasefire much less likely. One hardline minister in Netanyahu's cabinet urged the army to hit Rafah even harder. David Akin, Global News, Ottawa.
Israel also struck several targets inside southern Lebanon today, killing at least 8 people. Israel says the strikes were in response to an earlier attack by Hezbollah that saw 15 rockets launched into Israel from southern Lebanon. And the war in Gaza continues to spark protests here in Canada, and a deadline is fast approaching for protesters at Canada's largest university. Members of a pro-Palestinian encampment at the University of Toronto are meeting with the administration, which has given them until tomorrow morning to clear out. Protesters are presenting the university's leadership with a counteroffer after rejecting the administration's proposal last week. The protesters are demanding the university cut all ties with Israeli institutions and companies they say are profiting from the war in Gaza. A trespass notice was issued to the camp on Friday, and demonstrators now have until 8 a.m. to leave, or the university says it will take all necessary legal steps to remove them. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made a dramatic plea for the leaders of China and the U.S. to attend a major peace summit in Switzerland and apply pressure to the Kremlin.
We do not want the UN Charter to be burned down just like these books.
That's Zelensky speaking from the war-ravaged Kharkiv region, where Russia has escalated its attacks in recent weeks. His message directed at U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping, calling on them to compel Vladimir Putin to end the war. Turning now to the other big story of the day, a series of deadly storms in the southern United States. Take a look. This is all that remains of a Shell gas station in Valley View, Texas, after a series of powerful tornadoes whipped through Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. People near that gas station say they had mere seconds to find shelter.
And we ran up under the stairs and the little bathroom, and then it went boom, like we got hit by lightning or something, and then you could whistling. It's scary. It's the worst I've ever experienced.
At least 15 people were killed in those tornadoes, including 2 small children, and dozens more were injured. Crews are now scrambling to pull survivors from the rubble. The storms in Texas coincided with record-breaking heat over the U.S. Memorial Day weekend. And as Heather Yourex-West reports, forecasters warned this is just the beginning of wild weather ahead.
Incredible video as a tornado forms in North Texas Saturday afternoon, part of a supercell storm that erupted over the region.
When it hit, it was just so loud. It was like something just crashed into us, and I knew, and I didn't realize how bad until we came out.
In Texas, at least 7 people are confirmed dead so far, including 2 children aged 2 and 5.
It's like a punch to the stomach, really. I mean, this is my community. I know people that work here, and I see them every day.
In Oklahoma, what is believed to have been a long track tornado damaged homes and trees in 2 communities northeast of Tulsa. Baseball-sized hail was also reported. 2 people were killed in the storm that rolled in quickly early Sunday morning.
I'm still trying to process it. It's shock. Just everything you had, worked so hard for all these years is gone.
It was loud. I've never heard glass break in my life, and it was so scary. I'm just glad that my mom got me out. She got me out in a minute. Like, after she got me out and I was sat down, my glass immediately broke and that tree hit my window.
Parts of Arkansas were hit hard, too. Officials say thousands in the state are without power and at least 1 person is confirmed dead. Earlier this week, tornadoes in Iowa killed at least 5 people.
Several states will be impacted by several storms on Memorial Day. The storm is moving towards the east and extending all the way towards the southeast. And with it, it'll bring strong winds, large hail, and triggering tornado watches.
2024 shaping up to be one of the worst spring storm seasons in at least 5 years, with more severe weather still to come. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
12 people have been injured by severe turbulence on a Qatar Airways flight from Doha to Dublin. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner still managed to land safely and on schedule. Passengers say the turbulence lasted less than 20 seconds and hit during food and drink service. It comes just days after a similar incident involving severe turbulence on a Singapore Airlines flight. That saw dozens of passengers injured and 1 man killed in a suspected heart attack. It's been 10 months since flash flooding devastated parts of Nova Scotia, and some homeowners are still struggling to repair the damage. The flooding killed 4 people, destroying roads and swamping hundreds of homes. As Heidi Petracek reports, many Nova Scotians are still waiting for help that was promised by the province.
When floodwaters rushed into streets and homes in Nova Scotia last July, it caused more than $170 million in insured damage.
The driveway was covered.
And the flood burst through the back door and into Clifton Crux basement. Photos show the aftermath. The water had been high enough to make appliances float and left everything caked in mud. His estimated restoration cost $143,000, taxes in. His insurance capped at $50,000.
I took $50,000 off the $143,000, left me with $90,000 in change.
Then he applied to Nova Scotia's Disaster Financial Assistance Program, which pledged up to $200,000 for homeowners. But after months of waiting and piles of paperwork, Kruk was offered $6,000. He appealed and was then offered $15,000. At 74 years old, he's taken out a second mortgage to pay for the $60,000 he has left.
What would you say if somebody said, we're going to put your home back to the way it originally was? Just pay my contractor's bill. That's all I want.
The province is still processing more than 500 disaster assistance applications from the floods. 1,100 have been paid out to the tune of $14 million.
For the ones that haven't been paid out, we're certainly very sympathetic. We know it's been very traumatic for them, but it's been challenging for us too.
Flooding is actually the costliest natural hazard in Canada in terms of property damage.
It's why the Intact Centre on Climate Adaptation created a tool to help municipalities prepare for and prevent urban flooding, which is expected to increase in frequency.
We're expecting more kind of short duration, intense rainfall events. And we have, I think, everyone knows examples of those across Canada.
My doctor's increased a lot of my medications.
The stress has taken its toll on Kruk. He's not sure he could take another flood, especially after what he's paid for this one. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Middle Sackville, Nova Scotia.
The remains of an unknown soldier from Newfoundland, killed fighting in France during the First World War, has finally returned home. The casket arrived last night in St. John's after the French government formally transferred the remains to Canada in an emotional repatriation ceremony held on the very battlefield where he died more than a century ago. The unknown soldier's remains will now be interred at the National War Memorial in downtown St. John's on Newfoundland's Memorial Day on July 1st. Pushing British teens into service. Coming up, the UK Prime Minister's controversial call of duty. Another terrible tragedy to tell you about in India tonight. At least 7 babies are dead after a fire at a maternity hospital in Delhi. That fire broke out last night in the Indian capital. Several infants survived and are being treated for smoke inhalation. The cause is under investigation, but authorities have already arrested 2 doctors, including the hospital's owner. The death toll is climbing dramatically after that major landslide in Papua New Guinea. A UN agency says more than 670 people are feared dead after an entire village was buried Friday morning. That number is more than double the initial estimate. So far, only 5 bodies have been recovered from the rubble. More than 1,200 others have been left homeless by the disaster, and officials are now struggling to deliver badly needed aid to the remote area after the landslide cut off access to major roads. Well, just days after the British Prime Minister triggered an election, Rishi Sunak has announced a controversial campaign pledge. Sunak says if re-elected next month, he will bring back mandatory national service. The plan involves 18-year-olds choosing to either enlist in the military or perform community work. But the proposal could remain just that if Sunak's political fortunes don't improve fast. Redmond Shannon explains.
And we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
The timing of Rishi Sunak's drenched election call surprised many, as has his first big campaign announcement.
We will introduce a bold new model of national service for 18-year-olds.
The plan would see teens choose between a year in the military or complete 12 weekends of community work across a year. The vast majority would do the latter. Sunak claims it would help society and national security. These 16-year-olds who can't vote yet could be among the first to be enrolled.
Yeah, I found it on TikTok in the morning and my parents were speaking about it. Yeah.
And what are your parents saying?
It was divided. I can't lie. My dad he thought Rishi Sunak idea was good, but my mum thought otherwise.
I really don't want Rishi Sunak to win. After especially hearing about what he's done with this now as well, I don't want him to win.
It's 64 years since Britain has had national service, but with the governing Tories far behind in the polls, this could be seen as a Hail Mary pass to appeal to disillusioned voters. 80-year-old Peter Lyons remembers his uncle being called up to serve. He says the plan is a reflection of global instability.
They've suddenly woken up to the fact that the British Armed Forces are not anywhere near prepared to fight a war anywhere
Former social worker Steve Outerson believes it's purely election politics.
I think it's a gimmick, it will never see the light of day. I think it's just clutching at straws. I think if you really care about young people's welfare, you would invest properly in education.
The idea is far from unique in Europe. Many peaceful nations have forms of mandatory military service, among them Denmark, Finland and Switzerland. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Mexico is sweltering in an intense heat wave. Dozens of people have died from the so-called heat dome, and the most intense temperatures are yet to come. Mexicans are facing bone-dry conditions and serious water shortages. Water delivery has become a critical service in Mexico City, where temperatures could hit 35 degrees. That's far hotter than what the capital is used to and unbearable in a city where only the well-off have air conditioning. Next, Messi missing in action. How Vancouver soccer fans responded to a superstar snub. Well, as expected, it was a full house at BC Place in Vancouver last night for the much-anticipated match between the hometown Whitecaps and Inter Miami. That, despite a last-minute no-show. Argentina's World Cup superstar Lionel Messi was missing in action, and BC soccer fans were fuming. Trying to make the best of a messy situation, Whitecaps fans got creative with their chants and even their attire. Snubbed by soccer's top superstar, the disappointment on full display.
It's like going to see Taylor Swift and then the concert's going to start and Taylor Swift doesn't appear. You'd have every reason to be upset. Unlike
Messi, that crowd did show up as expected, setting an all-time attendance record. More than 51,000 soccer fans packed BC Place, some traveling huge distances and paying big bucks for tickets to catch a glimpse of the world's best. His club, Inter Miami, says the decision to keep Messi, along with striker Luis Suarez and Spanish midfielder Sergio Busquets at home, was Major League Soccer's grueling travel schedule.
MLS has, in the conversations with us, told us that they will look into it.
You get Inter Miami to fly all the way across the continent to play one soccer match. You can understand why Miami decided not to bring him or their other star players.
Unsatisfied with that explanation, fans are calling for compensation.
Fans were willing to pay whatever it took to get a chance to see this guy on Canadian soil. A full refund, full credit, something, because they should not be profiting from this.
The Whitecaps offered fans free tickets to a future game and half-price food and drinks, but many still left with a bad taste in their mouths.
Maybe sports fans have to unite and say, enough is enough. If we don't see a star player, we want our money back.
In the end, Miami didn't need Messi, beating the hometown team in their first ever meeting 2-1. And that is Global National for this Sunday night. I'm Jeff Semple. Tonight's Your Canada is this mural of Quebecois singer, songwriter, and poet Leonard Cohen in Montreal. We love seeing Your Canada, so please keep emailing your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you back here again tomorrow. Have a great night.